Welcome everyone. I see some familiar faces here and some names that I don't recognize. So Happy New Year to everyone. I hope the year started off well for you. I think we're all thinking that maybe 2021 is going to have a different feel to it than 2020, which is fantastic. And so I want to start this year with a presentation that I often do with my corporate clients, working with them. Sometimes at the start of the year, sometimes at the start of the financial year. It's all about planning and prioritizing for the year ahead. So we've got an hour working together today, and if you've been to my presentations before, you know that some of them are quite a lot of me presenting, and of course I always want to make them interactive with time for you to ask questions and so on. But today is going to be quite different. So today is very much a workshop. It's a little cut down version of one of the masterclasses that I run for clients. So expect to kind of roll up your sleeves and do some work today, because I do want to position this as a workshop or a masterclass. In fact, many people know me because I present big picture thinking, and I do strategic planning for leadership teams, and I do keynote presentations about the future. And not many people know that I also do this. So these are more intimate workshops and masterclasses, and I kind of like the online environment for that. I think it's not a bad way to present something like this, because it is going to be very personal today. So I'm not going to force anyone to share anything that they don't want to, but also it does give you the chance to work on your own plans, projects, goals for the next 90 days to a year. And you can kind of do this in a kind of an intimate environment. And I really like this online environment for that. So we've got an hour working together, working on this idea about, and I've titled this, how to get things done when everything keeps changing. And 2020 for many people has been a year that's created more change than any other for many, many people. So first of all, let me just ask you to type in the chat, because I'll ask you quite a lot to share in the chat room, to share your ideas. So type in the chat how you're feeling about 2021. So what are you feeling like? So for me, my main feeling is optimism. How are you feeling as you're moving into the start of a new year? And let me just see what people are saying as they're typing in. So optimism here, excited and ready for the year ahead, excited, hopeful, great opportunity. Yeah, uncertain, and I think that's going to be our future forever. Nikki, uncertain, hopeful, great. Looking forward and energetic towards the future, optimistic. Yeah, mixed feelings, interesting. Ambitious and pragmatic. Yeah, nice, Tanya. Jackie says 2021 seems optimistic and clear. Kayleen says worn out already. Galen, I think won one of our competitions a couple of months ago. I hope that's not what wore you out, Galen. Optimistically cautious. Okay, so there's a real feeling that it might be different. And just remember that just because the year changed over on the calendar, it doesn't necessarily mean that things have changed. But we as humans, every time we take one of these journeys around the sun, we think of it as a time to reset and start thinking again about what the next year might hold. And that's particularly why I wanted to run this presentation early in the year, so that you get a chance to work on some of your own goals, projects and priorities for the year ahead. Because if you don't do it, if we don't do it, and if we don't set our own priorities and goals, then the world is going to do it for us, and we're going to be pummeled around like a ball in a pinball machine unless we take control. And this is giving us some chance to take control, even in a world where we feel like we may have lost a lot of control. Okay, so my agenda for today, in the rest of the hour that we got together, is I want to do this in 3 parts. So firstly, I want to give you some really practical techniques that you can use day to day. So these are really practical things that you can put into your professional life and sometimes into your personal life on a daily basis to get things done when things are changing around you. When we're living in a world of lots of interruptions and distractions, what are some really simple things that we can do to get back a little bit of control? So I want to start by sharing with you 3 of those things. So that'll be me presenting, but of course there are ideas that you can ask me questions about as well. And the other thing with this group group is that, we've got almost 50 people here who are here live, and I want to tap into the intelligence of the group. So I also want you to share ideas with each other. So you can do it in the chat room as we go, but we'll also have a little section in the middle where I'll break you into little groups, and you can talk among yourselves about and share some ideas that are working for you, and also some feedback on the ideas that I've given you. And then the second half of the presentation is going to be me going through an exercise with you as a group, but it's really with you one-on-one, to help you prioritize for the year ahead. And I'll show you how to pick your priorities and how to create a little plan for making sure those priorities get executed and get implemented, even in this fast-changing world. Okay, so that's the game plan for today. We've got just under an hour together. So as I said, it's a cut down version of what I do with clients in the masterclass, but I want to give you some really practical things. So it's not going to be superficial, it's going to be in depth, and the more that you can put into this, the more that you will get out of it. And also, because you get the chance to share with other people as well, the more that you contribute, the more you'll help other people as well. Okay, so let's get straight into these 3 tips and ideas and techniques. So as we go, feel free to type in the chat room if you've got questions. And also, because this is a meeting rather than a webinar, and I'm allowing, I've set up Zoom so that you can turn on your microphone. When we get to questions at any time, if you want to turn on your microphone and ask your question out loud, you're most welcome to do that. I see people here, so I've got this in gallery view, so I can see all your smiling faces, but I would recommend for you that you put this in speaker view. I can see most people here have not got their cameras turned on, and that's okay. That's quite fine. If you want to, feel free to contribute even with your camera turned off if you want to. But if you want other people to see your smiling face, then feel free to turn your camera on as well. That's completely up to you. Okay, so first of all, given that I've titled this How to Get Things Done When Everything's Changing Around You, let me give you 3 really practical techniques that you can use to get things done when there are interruptions and distractions happening. Okay, so I'm going to share 3 things with you, and the first of these is an idea that is almost 100 years old now. It's probably older than that, but there's a story about Charles Schwab, who was the chairman of Bethlehem Steel about 100 years ago, one of the world's richest men at the time. He was looking for a way to be more productive with his time. And he went to a management consultant, Ivy Lee, and he asked him for some advice. And Ivy Lee said, look, I'll give you an idea, try it out for a few weeks, and then pay me whatever you think it's worth. And Schwab tried this idea, and 3 weeks later, he came back and he wrote Lee a check for $20,000, which is not bad, right? And even in today's money, that's not a bad payment for just this one idea. And so this is the idea, and I'll tell you what Lee told Schwab, and then I'll tell you how we can modernize it for the 21st century. So Lee's idea was very simple. He said to Schwab, at the start of every day, write down on a bit of paper the priorities the things that you want to achieve for the day in priority order. And then look at number 1 and work on it. When you finish that, cross it off, go to number 2 and work on that, and so on. And it's such a simple idea, but it meant that Schwab was prioritizing what was important for him, not necessarily whatever interruptions and distractions were coming up in the world around him. So what he decided to do was just go through his priorities, go through his tasks for the day in priority order from top to bottom. Now, as a head of the organization, he probably had a lot more control about then being able to manage whatever else was happening around him. And we may not have that same luxury there, because we've got a whole bunch of other stakeholders that are going to be interrupting and distracting us. We've got team members, we've got clients, we interrupt ourselves with things like social media. So how do we make this happen? My friend Neen James, who's an Australian who talks about time management, actually she talks about attention management. She's written a fabulous book called Folding Time. An Australian, she now lives in the USA, and she really talks about how do you make sure that you've got your attention on the right things, because she says the same thing that you hear many time management experts say. We've all got the same 24 hours in a day, so it's not a case of how do we manage time. It's not like we've got extra time, it's just how do we manage our attention. So this is Neen's idea, which is a variation of the Charles Schwab idea, or Ivy Lee's idea to Charles Schwab. So Neen reckons you should do this. At the start of each day, or preferably the night before, take a post-it note, and on that post-it note, or you can take 3, it depends. It's up to you whether you want it on 1 post-it note or 3. She says, take a post-it note and on it, write down 3 things that you want to achieve for the day. So 3 priorities for your day. And so the things that you choose are not things that are going to happen anyway. So for me, I'm running this presentation today, so that's not going to go on my list because it's going to happen anyway. Nikki and I, my fiance Nikki, we've got a date night tonight. That's, it's a high priority. It's really important, but that's not going to go on my list because it's going to happen anyway. But there are some other things that are going to happen. So I'm working on my next book, Disrupted, which is going to be launched by the end of this quarter. And one of my goals is to finish the first draft of chapter 7 today. So that's on my list. So it's the digital chapter. So that's on my post-it note. I'm updating a vault of resources as part of my membership site. That goes on the list. So what you do is you write down 3 things that you want to achieve for the day. So these are top priorities which you want to achieve. And then what Neen says, and I think this is the real magic in it, she says as you go through your day, you carry that post-it note around, or you stuck on the top of your laptop, and every time something else comes along that could be an interruption or a distraction that could take you away from those 3 things, you look at that list and you say, are those things, is this thing that's just coming along more than the 3 things that are on my list, more important? And sometimes they are either more important or more urgent. You need to drop what you're doing and tackle that thing. And in that case, you have to do it. But most of the time, it's not more important than those 3 things on the list. So you say, well, okay, I'm willing to do it, but these other things take priority. And more often than not, you'll find that things that appear on the list are a lower priority than the 3 things you've identified, or you might have crossed off a couple, so whatever's left on the list. And so you can put it aside and come back to those things later. Okay, so and that's just the process. At the end of the day, you may not have got through all 3 because there's some other really important and urgent things that came along during the day. And if they came along and they were more important, fantastic. That's what you needed to focus on. But more often than not, you'll find that you've completed at least 2 out of the 3 things on your list. It sounds like a really simple thing to do, and it is really simple. But it's really powerful as well, because what you're doing is you're setting your priorities for the day at the start of the day, and then judging everything else by your priorities. Okay, so that's the idea. Any questions, comments, ideas on that? Please ask, because it seems like a really simplistic idea. It may even feel too simple to try, but try it and you'll just find how effective it is, because what you're doing is you're prioritizing yourself and your priorities ahead of others. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to have a think about that. You may even want to write down your 3 things for today. It's not too late to start. And Karen says, how have I found it? Really effective, Karen. So sometimes I get lazy and I don't do it. And it's a pity. It's a pity, because I think, even for myself, even knowing how effective it is, I occasionally think, oh, I'm not going to write them down. But when I do, it keeps me accountable to myself. Okay, keep thinking, keep writing. I want to get something else for a little bit for the next one. Okay, any other questions or comments? And again, remember, you can turn your microphone on if you want to do that, if you want to ask a question or add a comment to that.
Hi, Gihan. Keith here.
Yes, Keith.
How are you going?
Good, good.
Good. I like the idea. I'm just, because I get a lot of priorities, or things that prioritize over the top of my existing priorities, I'm going to try it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I know the sort of role that you're in, Keith, like a fairly senior management role. You've got lots of call on your time from other people. And yeah, there are always going to be times when something else is going to be more important and more urgent that comes in. But the key point is that you can then assess it against that and see how it works.
And what if something stays on your list for several days?
Yeah, so what?
Drop it off the list?
Yeah, what I do is I just throw away the post-it note at the end of each day, so that the 3 priorities aren't necessarily the same each day.
Yeah.
So, Gian, hi, it's Ant here. When I've tried to use this technique before, I've struggled to be specific enough in terms of the daily activity. So I'm pretty clear on my high-level strategic priorities there, but really battle to say, well, what am I actually going to do this day and plan down to that level of detail? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because most people have the opposite problem. They go, oh, I want to do this today, and they don't think enough about the bigger picture. So one of the other things that I do and I recommend to my clients is work in 90-day projects or 3-month or 12-week projects. And because if you're working on a project that's going to take 12 weeks, it's pretty easy to plan out what each week's going to look like. And then for the week, you can plan out what you do on a particular day as well. I'm going to talk a little bit later about like creating habits for action. But I think that if you have a smaller time frame than a year, you can decide when you break down your plan into weeks and then days what you're going to focus on for that day. But actually it's an interesting perspective, because I think most people have the opposite problem. They're just doing stuff on a day-by-day basis without any bigger picture. Okay, Julian says in comments, I already do the 3 things. I hadn't considered the checking in when other distractions come along. Yep, great. And I think that's it, Gillian. If you've already written down the 3 things, then it's just an easy test for yourself to keep yourself accountable to yourself. David, the simplest ideas are regularly the hardest. Yeah. And look, the thing to do with this is just to be light with it. It's okay if someday you don't get through any of your 3 things because other things get in the way. But they get in the way because they're more important than what you have identified for yourself, and that's completely okay. It's not like saying we can close our office door and just focus on those 3 things to the exclusion of everything else. We allow other things in, but we make sure that we judge them against the priorities we've set for ourselves. Yeah, and so Paula says, like the idea of not carrying over tasks. Yeah, so this is true, Paula. So sometimes a job that I don't get done today may not go into tomorrow, because I might have designated tomorrow as a marketing day or as a working on the business day, and it was something completely, so I've got completely different goals for that day. So I don't feel like this list is getting longer and longer and longer. It's just at the start of each day, I start afresh and I say, if I end the day with these 3 things done, it would have been a pretty good day. That's a goal here. Okay, let me move on to the next one, because the next one's related to this, because often when I talk to clients about this idea of the 3 things, one of the things they say is email gets in the way. And for many of us, email is one of our biggest challenges and questions. So this question invariably arises. So I want to give you one really powerful principle around email. Now, you may have heard me talk about this before, because it's the one thing that I reckon will make the biggest difference to your email management. So it's a concept called inbox zero. And I've heard it's not my idea, the concept of inbox zero. So I've heard other people talk about it, but my process around it is very different from what other people say. So for other people, the goal is to get through things in your inbox and delegate or dump or defer and do those sort of things. So you process your inbox very quickly, so it's always empty very soon after you open it. So that's my goal as well, but the process is different. And so my process is the way that you would normally think about your letterbox outside, sitting outside your home, and you get mail in the letterbox. You may go and check your mail every day or every 2 days now, depending on how quickly Australia Post delivers it, and you go through the mail in your letterbox. Now imagine you had a lot of mail in your letterbox. Some of it is junk mail, so you chuck it in the recycling bin straight away. Some of it is, say, a bill that you have to pay, so you have it in a pile somewhere with bills that you're going to deal with later. There's some things that you need to deal with immediately, and so on. There's one thing that you never do when you take something out of your letterbox. You never, never, never shove it back in. Do you agree? Like, I think that most of us act that way. We don't stuff back into the letterbox. And yet we do that with email all the time. You open your inbox, you look at the mail that's in there. Some of it you can process, some of it you can delete, some of it you can respond to immediately, some of it you can forward to somebody else. But what about the rest of it? You just leave it sitting there. It's a bizarre equivalent. It's equivalent of the bizarre action of shoving mail back into your letterbox. So my process of getting inbox zero is a simple process, and it's like the way that you treat mail in your letterbox. So the way it works is, let's say it's like this. So got this little demo here, which I'm going to show you. So this is my inbox here, and I've got some mail coming into my inbox. And so I've just got some playing cards here, right? So these are the bits of mail that have come into my inbox. What you do in your email is you set up 3 separate folders from your inbox. I use Gmail. In Gmail, they're called tags. In other software systems like Outlook, they're called folders. And the folders, you may have hundreds of other folders, but set up 3 for processing your inbox. One of them is this one. It's called Today. You've got another one called This Week. And you've got another one called Next Week or Later. Okay, you can call it Next Week or Later. So you've got Today, This Week, and Next Week or Later. And then what happens is, when you open your inbox, and you can do this as many times you like during the day, so I will open my inbox 30 or 40 times a day, and I go through it, and every bit of mail that comes in, here's the rule: you can do only one of 2 things with it. One, you can chuck it away. So if it's junk mail or you don't need to read it anymore, you can delete it. That's okay. But the only other thing that you can do with the mail is put it in one of those 3 folders: Today, This Week, or Later. So if it's something that you don't need to process today, you can say, okay, I'm going to put that in the This Week folder. If it's something you don't need to process at all this week, you can put it into the Next Week folder. And if it's something, so that's this week is stuff that you don't need to look at today. Next week or later is stuff that you don't even need to worry about until Monday morning at the earliest. Okay, and anything else goes into the Today folder. So nothing sits in your inbox. You don't even reply to mail in your inbox. So if you get something that's really important, let's say a picture card here, a picture card is really important, and I know that, but I don't need to deal with it today, then it goes into This Week. If it's super, super, super important, and I know that I need to drop everything and tackle that straight away, so here's a joker that comes in, what happens to it? It goes into Today. Okay, so that's the whole process, is just either deleting your mail or filing it into one of those 3 folders. That will take 30 seconds at the most. At the end of the 30 seconds, if there was one of these jokers in the pack that you need to tackle straight away, of course, you go to the Today folder and you tackle it. And it's not like you're going to forget about it. It's there, it's front of mind, but your inbox is empty. And that's the key. Okay, so you go to you pick up the urgent thing and you say, is that more important than the 3 things that I've got written down on my little post-it note? If it is, then I'm going to tackle that. But you're tackling it with an empty inbox. And that's the secret to getting inbox 0 almost like every time you open your inbox, like almost immediately. So within a minute, your inbox is empty. So you know the sort of emails that you get that say that it's an email that you just want to reply to say, thanks, Keith, just acknowledging that I got your email. Even that goes into the Today folder. You never reply to anything from your inbox. You never do anything. You don't even forward it. You stick it, you either delete it or you stick it into one of those 3 folders, and then you tackle it. Now, again, this sounds like such a simple idea, almost simplistic, and yet if you try it, you'll find it's so effective. And especially if it's been a long time since you've had an inbox with 0 messages in it, probably don't realize how psychologically wonderful it feels to have an empty inbox. All right, so Meredith says, such discipline, I'm going to do it. And the other thing about this is so easy to do. There's nothing to stop you from doing it as soon as you hang up from this program, and just do it now. Just file everything into Today, This Week, or Next Week, and then tackle it from there. None of your email gets forgotten or lost, because these 3 folders, they're not filed away forever. There's just at the end of the week, you'll go through the next week items. At the end of the day, you look at this week and decide if there's anything you need to work on for the next day. So nothing gets lost. It's still there. It's just not cluttering up your inbox. Okay, Paula says, going to try it. John says, turn notifications off. Don't open email except at pre-scheduled times of the day. I'm going to get to that next. Felicity says, what do I do with all those old but important emails? So here's another thing, Felicity. If you have a lot of emails in your inbox and you want to start this process and you want to start afresh, there are 2 ways you could do it. One is the nuclear option, the more drastic way. The second one is the way to ease into it. So the nuclear option, the drastic way of doing it, is you go to your inbox and you select all your email and you click delete immediately. Now what that does, doesn't delete it, it puts it into trash. And then you go into trash and then you selectively move things into the today, this week or next week folders. Okay, that's one way of doing it. The slightly easier way to ease into it is to create a new folder called 2020 emails, for example. And then you select all your emails in your inbox, drag them into this 2020 emails folder. Now you've got inbox 0. From now on, you can do this process I've described. And when you've got a few spare minutes, you go to that 2020 emails and you drag some of them across selectively. Okay, that, if you want to go the more drastic approach, just chuck everything in trash, knowing that your trash is going to be deleted after 30 days, you can do that. Okay, so either way is a way of doing it. Okay, Tanya says, I follow something similar already, but use different criteria, delete tasks, set up an appointment, only open emails twice a day and kill all alerts. Yeah, so I think this is really good. I think that one thing that makes a huge difference in the process I've described is that you move stuff out of your inbox. So I've seen people who, flag things, set priorities, have these fancy tools to put things in different colors, but they're still sitting in your inbox. And it's like going to your letterbox every day and you've shoved mail back in there, and then the next time you come to open it, you then have to sort through all these other less important things to get to all the new email. Just try getting it out of your inbox. Just try that. You can still do all of the stuff with alerts and colors and priorities, but put them in the other folders. It's just amazing once you do that, just to see what it does for your mindset. Jenny says, I use a file called old to month. Yeah, every 3 months when I follow the disciplined way. Yeah, I do dump into that folder. So they're exactly right. So Jenny, you can do that, right? Like dump the email, but get it out of your inbox. Because the thing with your inbox is the email in your inbox, most of it, if you look at it now, I reckon 80% at least is other people's goals and other people's priorities. Okay, so if you're responding to what's in your inbox, you're spending your whole day responding to other people's goals and priorities. Even if they're replying to something that you've sent out, you want a response because it's related to your goal, you're kind of waiting for them to respond, and it's sitting in your inbox, and it arrives in your inbox according to their time frame and their schedule. And you don't want to be living your life by other people's priorities. And if you leave stuff in your inbox, you're kind of always remembering other people's priorities instead of what you should be thinking about, which are your own. Okay, and this third one, which John kind of alluded to, this idea of, I think, working on thing at, don't open email except at pre-scheduled times of the day. So this third one, this idea that I want to share with you, it's called the Pomodoro Technique. Again, this is something that some people have heard about. Actually, let me just address a couple of the other questions and comments. So David says, I do something similar. The difference is I'll attach non-urgent emails to diary reminders. Fantastic. Fantastic. And using this approach, I always have an empty inbox. Yeah, great. So I reckon that's a really good idea, David. That and I think Tanya mentioned earlier as well. If you've got some other systems that will also allow you to attach email to different things, or attach appointments and send you notifications, fantastic. Do all of that. But also get the email out of your inbox. And Catherine's question about double handling. So the only thing that I would say about double handling, Catherine, is because it only takes you a couple of seconds to decide with an email which of those 3 folders it goes into, the first handling is tiny. It's not like you're reading the email, thinking about what you're going to do, who you're going to delegate it to, set a time frame for it, and then file it away, and then you have to come back and open it again and do all that thinking all over again. You don't have to do that. You look at the email quickly and just make a quick decision about, do I need to tackle this today? Do I need to tackle it later in the week? Or do I need to tackle it next week? And then, if it's something that is complex, but you don't need to do anything till next Monday, just file it away into next week. And it just goes out of your mind. So I don't think about those emails until Sunday night or Monday morning when I decide what I'm going to do with it. So it is a little bit of double handling, but it's worth doing. Okay, the third one, this idea of the Pomodoro Technique is, so the Pomodoro is an Italian word for tomato. So I don't, and it's kind of based on the idea of these cooking timers. So I don't, they're shaped like a tomato or an apple. I don't have a tomato one, but I have this little crazy chicken. And so the Pomodoro Technique is based on this idea of working in sprints. And the problem it solves is that it's quite challenging for us now as busy people to be able to set aside time for work that matters, what Cal Newport calls deep work. So deep work is a work that's really important. It's not just like posting something like a little quick note on social media. It's not just like replying to an email. It's not even delegating a task to somebody. It might be like writing a chapter for a book, or thinking about how your business could be disrupted by a nimble startup who's now taking advantage of the fact that the world has been disrupted and customers are changing their priorities and they're looking for alternatives. So that deep work, we very rarely find the time for now. And you may say, I need to set aside half a day to do some thinking. But it's hard to find half a day to do that. And we've also been programmed now to want to interrupt ourselves. So what can we do to still be able to do deep work, but without having to find half a day or a day or 2 days to be able to do that? So the Pomodoro Technique says work in sprints. So it's an idea around attention and energy. So the traditional Pomodoro, the original Pomodoro Technique works like this. You set aside your work to be done in half-hour blocks. And then what you do at the start of each half hour is you take out your little Pomodoro timer. And by the way, there are apps that do this now. So you can get an app that will do exactly this. And you set it for 25 minutes. You set it for 25 minutes. Yeah, and then you turn on the timer and let it go. And during that time, you focus on whatever you decide to work on for that 25 minutes. And then you don't check email during that time. You don't check social media. You turn off notifications on your phone. You put your phone into flight mode, which is quite a good use of flight mode, given that you haven't been able to do much else with that over the last year. So you do shut your office door if you need to do that. Tell people not to interrupt you. And for that 25 minutes, you're head down, bum up, working on whatever you're working on. When the timer goes off, at the end of 25 minutes, you set it for another 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes is your break. So that's when you can check your inbox and bring it down to 0 again. That's when you can goof around and work on social media. Stand up, walk around, drink a glass of water, go and don't go and interrupt somebody else. But you can do something in that 5-minute break. When that timer goes off again, then you set another 25 minutes and so on. So if you've got 3 hours to work on, it means that you're roughly working 3 hours, a little bit less than 3 hours, but you break it down into those intervals. And again, what it does is it helps you psychologically know that if you feel like, oh gee, I wonder what's happened in email land in the last 20 minutes, it doesn't matter because you're going to get the chance to check it soon. So you have the discipline to work for 25 minutes on whatever you're working on, knowing that you're going to have a 5-minute break at the end of that. If anyone's got any comments or questions, please type or ask them. But basically, that's the idea of the Pomodoro Technique. As I said, there are apps that will do this for you now, that will help you with this. I suggest when you start, stick to the standard 25-5, 25-5, 25-5. And I think it says after about 3 Pomodoros, then you take a longer break, like that might be morning tea or whatever. But follow that, be disciplined and follow that. And then after that, you may want to vary it. So for me, I've found that the sweet spot for me is to work for 40 minutes. And that's the length that I can work. And then an 8-minute break. So I've just played around with it once I got into the habit of doing it, and I found 40 and 8 works for me. I saw some other research that said that the sweet spot, based on a whole bunch of people around the world, is 53 minutes and then an 8-minute break. But I reckon if you're starting off, just go for the basic 25-5, 25-5. Again, psychologically, it's great to know that it really helps your brain to know that you are going to be able to check email and see what's happened on LinkedIn no longer than 25 minutes from now. And therefore, you can dedicate your time to that 25 minutes doing whatever that deep work you're working on. Nikki, I used to use a timer system when I was a young mum, trying to keep on top of housework tasks. Yeah, so this is also something I teach. I don't work with school groups generally, but I've got young people in my life who have been helping with study skills and other things. And as much as I help them with content around maths and physics, I also try to help them with processes like this. And the Pomodoro ones are really useful ones. So they don't feel like I need to study for 3 hours on this. I can do 25 minutes of study, take a break, and come back. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so I've given you 3 ideas here. So I've given you the idea that I've given you Neen's idea of the post-it notes. I've given you the inbox 0 idea, which is for your email, so that every time you open your email, you can empty your inbox almost immediately. And I've given you the Pomodoro Technique idea. What I'm going to ask you to do is work in small groups and share with the people in your group 2 things. So one is which of these things you think you could use. But secondly, and I think the more useful one, is which of these things are you going to have a challenge with, and ask the group for assistance with helping you implement this. And I really do want you to get some ideas from other people in the group. So let me switch now to the third part of what I want to do in this presentation, which is help you with your own specific goals, projects, ideas for the next 90 days to a year. And so I'm going to take you through this little process here. I'm going to suggest that if you don't already have me on speaker view, I suggest that you do that. So put me on speaker view rather than gallery view, and I've spotlighted myself, so I think that'll happen by default anyway. You need a little bit of paper and pen for this, by the way. If you regularly take notes on iPad or a tablet, this is probably not going to work, because I'm going to ask you to fold the paper and then rip it into bits. So that's not so useful if you're using an iPad or a tablet. So what I'd like you to do is take a blank sheet of paper. You just need 1 sheet of A4 paper, letter if you're in the US. So 1 sheet of A4 paper, and fold it into 8. So you fold it in half again, and then fold it in half again. And so you have got a bit of paper that is in 8 segments, but kind of like a little bit bigger than a business card. So you'll end up with a bit of paper with these 8 segments on it. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do soon is to write something on each of those segments. And I won't do that just yet. I want to give you a few seconds to take your bit of paper and fold it, and have a little writing implement ready so that you're ready to do this. I'm going to give you a minute to do this, and I'll explain what I'm going to get you to do, and then I'll give you a minute to write down on that bit of paper. And then I'm going to ask you to rip that paper into those 8 segments. So if you finish writing down those 8 things and you want to start ripping it into the 8 segments, then by all means do that if you write them down quickly enough. Okay, so you've got this bit of paper with 8 bits on it. You're going to write something in each of those 8 segments, and then you're going to rip up the paper. So you've got these 8 little bits of paper that you can move around on the desk in front of you. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to write down. So I'd like you to think about, and keeping in mind that we're talking about priorities, projects, ideas for the coming year or the coming 90 days or whatever, keep that in mind as you're writing things down. Now, you can choose to do this for your personal life, or your professional life, or both. I recommend that you do it for both because it's part of life. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do is, in the next minute, in the next 60 seconds, write down on your paper. Oh, by the way, the way to do it is, so you've got this bit of paper here, which is split into 8 segments, and on each of those segments, I'd like you please to, when you scribble something, when you write down what I'm asking you to write, can you just write it at the top of that business card bit of the segment? Okay, because I'm later going to ask you to write 3 things down here. Okay, so just give yourself space to write down 3 other things. So this is like the title of each of those 8 segments. Okay, so in the next 60 seconds, think about 8 people, projects, ideas, goals, things that you want to, that are important to you in your life. It could be professional life, personal life, a combination of them. Things that are important to you, things, people, projects that are important to you in your life. Okay, I'll give you a minute to do that. So let me just set our timer, and I'll just get that going. Wow, time flies when you're having fun, right? Okay, so I hope you've written down most of those 8 things. So they're not going to be the only 8 things that matter to you in your life, but I reckon giving you a minute and putting you under that time constraint, you've probably got the most important people, projects, things in your life. If you've got a partner, I hope that your partner is on one of those 8 bits of paper. And if you haven't, maybe you want to cross out one of the others. Okay, so if you haven't already, can you please take that bit of paper and then rip it up into the 8 segments? So, fold it, rip it, so you've got 8 things that you can then take and put on the table or the desk in front of you. And as you're doing that, look at identifying 3 of them that are absolutely not negotiables in your life. So these are the 3 things that if I focused on these 3 things, then great. But if I neglected any one of those 3 things, it would be a disaster. It would be a travesty. And I think you probably know what I mean by that. I'm sure that some key people in your life would appear on that list. There may be a key project that you're working on that is really something that you want to get done. Okay, so rip it up. You'll end up with 8 segments, and 3 of them you've identified as absolutely not negotiable, and then up to 5 others, which are kind of the lower priorities, but they're still important because you still listed them in your top 8. Okay, so I'm just giving you time to rip them up and identify your top 3. Now, when I run this as a full masterclass, we actually go through all 8 of them, starting with the top 3. But for now, because I just want to give you a flavor of this, and you can then take it away and do it in full later, I want to give you enough that you can go ahead and do that. So let's just work on those top 3. Okay, so for those 3 things, so you've got 3 of your top priorities that are not negotiable, that are the most important things in your life, according to your criteria. So some of them might be personal, some of them might be professional. On those 3, which you've written down, so you've written down a title for each one. Think about the last 90 days and give yourself a tick. So give yourself a tick on that bit of paper if you think you have devoted enough resources, time, energy, attention, money, whatever, however you measure it, by according to whatever criteria you want, for that priority. So if it's a person in your life, so for me, my 21-year-old stepdaughter Abby is on my top 3. Have I given her enough attention, time, resources in the last 90 days? If I have, tick. Working on this book, that's another one of my top 3. Have I given that enough time, energy, attention, and so on? I give that a tick. There may be some things that are really important to you, but you realize you haven't given them enough priority. And this is just a way to check in for where you are. And there's no judgment around this. It just gives you an idea of where you are and where you're spending your time, attention, and resources. Because all these things we've talked about earlier, about managing email and working in sprints and setting your 3 priorities for the day, if they don't match the most important things in your life, then all you're doing is you're doing techniques that don't lead anywhere important. Okay, so you've got these 3 things and you've got some assessment of how well they're working for you. Okay, so now I'm going to give you, again, 3 very simple things, and I can do this fairly quickly, 3 ways that you can work on those priorities. So take one of your 3 top priorities, whichever one you think that you're going to work on as a priority in the next 90 days. It may not be a 90-day project, but it's something that you're going to work on soon. And if you've got your card, okay, so you've got a title, so you know what your priority is. It might be somebody's name, it might be a project that you're working on. I'm going to ask you to, well, I'm going to give you 3 things: an action, a habit, and an as if. So don't write down a how on your note, but I'm going to ask you to put in those 3 spaces: an action, a habit, and an as if. So let me tell you what those 3 things are. So let's start with action. So what is something that you can do in the next week, and preferably sooner, that will advance that goal or that idea? Okay, that would positively advance it. So what can you do in the next week, and preferably sooner, that will advance that idea? So if I'm talking about my stepdaughter and I think that I should make a lunch date with her to catch up with her, find out how her new job's going, one thing I can do is send Abby a text saying, are you free for lunch sometime next week? Now, she may not be, but at least it's some action that I've taken that'll advance that. And if she's not free, then we reschedule. But it's better than me sitting around thinking, oh, she's going to be so busy. She's in week 3 of her new job. She won't have time. It's something that I can actually do. With my book, I could get my designer to create a cover. I could post it on social media and say, what do you think about the cover for my new book? Okay, that's something I could do. Or it could be that I finish the first draft and send it off to the editor. So that's something internal, but it's still something that would advance it. Okay, what's something that you can do in the next 7 days to advance it? Some people here have heard me talk about the idea of ooching. I'm sure, Keith, you've heard me talk about that. It's an idea from sailing that says if you don't know what to do, just do something. Just try something and see what happens. And I reckon with any of our goals, we should ooch, ooch, ooch. Do lots of little ooches to make a little bit of progress, or to actually test the waters and then see what happens. It helps us decide which direction we're going to go in. Okay, so that's action. The second one is habit. So we don't necessarily like to admit it, but we live most of our life by habit. I remember when I was teaching Abby as a 17-year-old about driving, I took her out when she was on L plates, and I said, Abs, look, 90%, 99% of what you do when you drive is habit. So now's the time to cultivate good habits. So it means always look over your shoulder, even if you know there's no cars coming. Always look over your shoulder, because you get into that habit, because that's the habit that you want to cultivate. Decide what habits you're going to create. I'm going back through the scrolling to see who asked a question about what happens during the day and the Pomodoro. I can't see who asked it, but so I reckon there are 2 ways to create habits. One is around calendars and the other one is around events. So calendar habit might be, so a client of mine, she says every Monday is a marketing Monday. So Mondays is working on doing marketing. I used to set aside Friday as working on the business instead of working in the business. Somebody else I know, he says he's got his, the equivalent of his 3 things on his post-it notes. He says that he gets through one of them before 8 o'clock in the morning every day. So he's already crossed off one thing early in the day. So that's based on calendar or based on time. The second way of doing it is to base it on an event. So what is some other habit that you always do? Brush your teeth twice a day, put on your seatbelt every time you get in the car, wear pants to work. Well, maybe that's not so true in 2020, right? But there's certain things that you do that if you say every time I brush my teeth, or just before I brush my teeth, what I'm going to do is spend 5 minutes on quality time with my kids or something like that. Every time I put on my seatbelt or take off my seatbelt to get out of the car and I open the door, I'm going to work on something. I know some people who say every time I get back from lunch, I'm going to spend the first 20 minutes instead of checking email, they're going to work on some of that. They're going to do one really important Pomodoro. Okay, so what's a habit that you can do? And the last one is as if. So what identity could you adopt that would make it easier for you to achieve that goal, work on that project, or give priority to the thing that you've written down on this sheet? So for me, my hero is Mark Taylor, former Australian cricket captain and Australia's greatest ever air conditioning salesperson. And so, whenever you think about cricket, whenever I think about cricket, I think, what would Tubby Taylor do? So here's my little Ashes replica, which we will be retaining in next season. What would Tubby Taylor do? So it's like adopting that identity. And you don't have to pick a real person. It can be, you say, my identity is that I'm an Australian. And if so, well, if I'm a very patriotic Australian, what does that mean? Does that mean that I want no internal borders because we're all Australians, and or I want to make sure that we can bring Australians in who are stuck overseas, make sure that's a priority. If I say, your identity might be I'm a caring parent, and that's a high priority. That might mean that if you're working from home, then you say my family takes priority over whatever I'm doing in my professional role. So those identities will then, the idea is your identity drives your habit, and your habits drive your actions. And the habit, when I'm talking about identity here, is a little bit like a jacket. You can try on this jacket, take on this identity, act as if you are this person or you have these values, and see how it works. And if it doesn't work for you, take it off and try another jacket. Okay, so there we go. So there's a as if, going from left to right, it's actions, an immediate action that you can do in the short term. What's a habit that you can create that means that it's going to stick and continue? And then what's some identity that will just help you automatically move in the direction of achieving your goals? Okay, John says we're not talking cricket. Yes, thanks, John. I know it's been a bit sad for me this week, but that's all right. I can put that behind me. Okay, so that's the process. I think that as I said at the start, I work with a lot of leaders and organizations and teams about big picture thinking, innovation, change, disruption, and believe me, all of those things are really important. But on a personal basis, individually, those things that you've written down on those 8 bits of paper are more important than anything else. Because if you get those things right, then if they happen to align with what your organization's doing as well, fantastic. Happy days, because then you're moving in the right direction. If you don't get those things right first, it doesn't matter. If you're a leader and you're trying to pull everybody along, but they don't have these things right, then it's very hard to pull them along, even with the best will in the world. Okay, so we've come to time. Thank you everyone for taking part. I hope you've got some value from that. I will be sending out the recording to people afterwards. If you're watching this recording, I hope you got some value from this, and I hope you have been pausing and doing the exercises as we go. As I said, this is something that I do with teams individually, and let me say that again. I think I should say I do this with teams, but it's very much an individual thing. And it's either online or in person. And I love doing this. I love doing this because it helps people figure out what's important to them. What's your North Star? What's the direction that you're heading? And then how does that work for you in achieving your personal and professional goals? All the best for 2021. Have a great day. Stay safe and healthy. And I'll see you in the future. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.